My rich boyfriend Chad thought he was an alpha, but without me, I couldn't even pay rent. His elite men's club just watched as Facebook destroyed him, and now he's living with his mom. I don't even know where to start. Maybe I just need to vent. I'm not looking for advice. I just want to know if anyone else has been through this. I'm 30. Chad is 30. Before we'd been together for 2 years, and 6 months ago, we moved in together. Or rather, I moved into his gleaming condo downtown. At first, everything seemed fine. Chad was charismatic, successful, and seemed genuinely smitten. We had an understanding. We'd split the bills and chores 50-50 until we decided to have kids. If that ever happened, we agreed he'd take on more of the financial and domestic load, because I'd be the one risking my body, my career, my health. That seemed fair. That seemed like partnership. Looking back, I see the cracks appeared sooner than I realized. Chad's alpha persona was meticulously crafted. He woke up at 5 a.m. to lift weights, tracked his macros with the zeal of a scientist, and peppered our conversations with terms from self-help gurus. Optimization, peak performance, leveling up. It was exhausting, but also kind of endearing. And then, 2 months ago, Chad got a tiny promotion at his tech company, just a slight bump in pay, no major responsibilities added, no drastic lifestyle change, just a little more money. We adjusted our bill split accordingly, and I didn't think about it, but something in him shifted. It started small, so small I almost didn't notice. He'd forget to do the dishes when it was his turn. He'd leave the laundry sitting in the hamper, even though we had always split that task. Then gradually it became more blatant. He'd sit on the couch all weekend watching sports or scrolling through Instagram while I did my half of the chores, and increasingly his while his half piled up in the corners of the apartment rotting. When I called him out, he blamed it on stress, said work was getting to him, that he just needed to relax on weekends. But we both work corporate desk jobs. It's not like he's out there breaking his back on a construction site. If I could pull my weight, why couldn't he? I'd begun to suspect the truth was far more sinister. The breaking point came when I found mold growing in a pot he was supposed to clean. It wasn't just any pot either. It was a designer planter from a trendy boutique, the kind Chad loved to show off to guests. He had just put the lid on and left it there, out of sight, out of mind. I nearly gagged. How long had he been ignoring it? How long had he been waiting for me to cave and clean up after him? I had to take a day off work, just to catch up on the clean meaning he neglected an entire day. And the final straw, groceries. It was his week to do them. Usually, if one of us was too tired, we'd at least have the decency to let the other know, so we could order food. But he didn't. He just came home empty-handed and sat down like nothing was wrong, like it wasn't even worth mentioning. That night, I came home to an empty fridge, a growling stomach, and Chad on the couch, playing a video game, oblivious. I confronted him, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely contain. "What the hell, Chad? What are we supposed to eat? I am tired of picking up after you." I told him that if he wasn't willing to pull his weight anymore, we needed to hire a cleaner and split that cost. "No," Chad said, his eyes never leaving the screen. "I don't want a stranger in our flat." "Fine, then we need to start ordering grocery deliveries," since he clearly couldn't be bothered to do it himself. His response, he finally looked at me, a flicker of annoyance in his usually placid eyes. "You're being frivolous with money, Sarah. We don't need to pay someone else to do what we can do ourselves." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to keep my voice steady. Fine, if he wanted a traditional setup where one person handled most of the housework while the other focused on work, I could do that, but it wouldn't come for free. "I'll take over the chores," I said, "but I'll need to cut down my working days from 5 to 4. That means a direct loss in income. If you expect me to prioritize housework over my career, then you'll need to compensate me for that sacrifice. You'll cover the difference in rent, and I'll charge you an hourly rate for the cleaning at the market average for a housekeeper." I watched him carefully. He had been so smug before, so confident, so ready to shoot down my suggestions. But now his expression froze, his lips slightly parted, his brows furrowed, his hands twitching like he wanted a gesture but didn't know how. He didn't expect this. For the first time in weeks, he had nothing to say. It was like watching a malfunction in real time. This was a man who always had an argument, always had some excuse, but now silence. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about fairness. It was never about fairness. It wasn't that he couldn't afford a cleaner. It wasn't that chores were overwhelming him. He just didn't want to do them. He wanted to see how far he could push me, how much I would take, how long it would take for me to fold and accept my place. My place wasn't partner, it was servant, and he'd never told me the realization burned through me like acid. If you love me, why are you trying to manipulate me into a situation that benefits only you? My voice was calm, but I could feel my pulse hammering in my neck, my fingers curling into fists. Still, Chad said nothing. Then something clicked in my brain. I knew his friends from the elite men's club I'd endured, count dinner parties with them and their vapid girlfriends. I had seen how they talked about women like accessories, like inconveniences who needed to be trained. These were guys who struggled to keep relationships because they wanted girlfriends who acted like 1950s housewives but looked like Instagram models. They aren't wives, they are trophies. That was the way they talked. Did your friends put you up to this? I asked, my tone sharp. Did they tell you to start testing me to see if I'd be a proper woman? His expression shifted guilt. That was all the confirmation I needed. And then, as if the words had been waiting to escape, Chad said it, a proper woman would be happy to look after the house. I actually felt my stomach drop like a physical sensation of something snapping inside me. And then he went further. You're just being difficult. I don't know why you're so obsessed with money, you sound like a gold digger. Silence. Thick, suffocating, deafening silence. I blinked at him, the words hitting me like a slap. A gold digger? A gold digger? Was this a joke? I wasn't asking for diamonds. I wasn't asking for vacations in Paris or a brand new car. I was asking to be compensated for unpaid labor that he was deliberately dumping on me. For the first time in my life, I felt something cold settle in my chest, a sharp electric kind of rage. Oh, I breathed, nodding slowly. So, that's how it is? Chad said nothing. You're right, I continued, voice shaking with fury. I am a gold digger. I'm digging for the absolute bare minimum and I still can't find it. Chad scoffed, rolling his eyes, but I wasn't finished. You know what that makes you? I leaned in slightly, staring straight into his face. A gold digger too, except you're digging for a free housekeeper and a personal chef. You want a woman to cook clean and take care of everything for you, for free. His jaw tightened. I had him now. So, don't talk to me about money, I snapped, because if you were really proud of your promotion, if you actually had your together, you'd be hiring a cleaner and paying for a chef, instead of manipulating the woman you supposedly love into doing it all for free. And not really for free, actually, because if I take a day off to clean up after your useless ass, I'm technically paying to be your maid. He stared at me, stunned, his mouth opened, and closed like he wanted to say something. But what could he say? I had already seen the truth, and I wasn't unseeing it. I had wasted 2 years on this. Man, 2 years, thinking we were partners, 2 years, believing we were equals, and now, here I was watching him unraw because he had gotten a tiny taste of power and couldn't resist trying to use it against me. A gold digger. The words rang in my head over and over like a bad joke. I had never felt so humiliated or so done, and I hadn't even packed my bags yet. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see the man I had loved. I saw dead weight. I had spent 2 years thinking we were building something together, that we were equals, but he wasn't. Lifting me up, he was dragging me down, inch by inch, turning me into something smaller, weaker, more exhausted and worse. I had let him. I should have seen this long ago, and I hated that. I hated the sting of betrayal, but more than that, I hated my own blindness. So I did the only thing left to do. I turned my back on him and started packing. The moment I reached for my suitcase, I felt it a shift in the air, the realization creeping onto his face. Are you serious? His voice was flat, almost amused, like he thought I was bluffing, like I was just throwing a tantrum and would get over it. I ignored him. I yanked open drawers, stuffing my things into bags with sharp, angry movements. Every folded shirt felt like an accusation. Every pair of shoes reminded me how many times I had walked past his growing mess, waiting for him to step up. He didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, arms crossed, watching like he was waiting, like he thought I would see sense and come crawling back. You're overreacting, he finally muttered. You'd regret this. I paused, gripping the edge of my suitcase so hard my fingers, regret. I turned to face him, my chest rising and falling, with shallow, uneven breaths. The worst part was he wasn't even angry. He was just smug. He really thought he had won. I laughed. I actually laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that felt like breaking glass in my throat. You really think I'll regret leaving a man who can't even wash a dish? I shook my head, my own voice quivering with fury. You're pathetic. That got to him. His jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists, but he didn't say a word. And I realized something else in that moment. He wasn't ignoring me out of guilt. He was ignoring me because he didn't think I had the guts to actually leave. So I did. I threw the last of my things into the suitcase, zipped it shut, and dragged it to the door. And as I stood there looking back at him one last time, all I felt was embarrassment. Embarrassment that I wasted 2 years. Embarrassment that I didn't see this side of him sooner. Embarrassment that I had fought for this relationship while he was sitting there waiting for me to see sense and accept less than what I deserved. "You don't need to contact me," I said, voice hollow, and then I walked out. I blocked him everywhere, and for a while it was quiet until my phone started buzzing. Not from him, but from mutual friends. He wasn't handling this well. Apparently, now that I was actually gone, he was desperate to talk. But instead of messaging me directly, he was using them, sending voice notes, texts, anything, like some pathetic game of emotional telephone. Some of my friends ignored him, some entertained it, thinking I'd want to. No, I didn't. But then one of our mutual guy friends dropped the real bombshell. HEK, been listening to some weird podcasts lately. The whole masculinity thing, I think that's where this all started. Mike said he went all in. Man bought the t-shirts, the supplements, the whole 9 yards. I felt a sharp jolt in my stomach. So, that was it. That's where this sudden shift in behavior had come from. That's why out of nowhere, he started acting like I owed him my labor, like he was entitled to me, sacrificing my career, my time, my energy. Because some basement-dwelling fake guru on the internet told him that a proper woman should do everything for him while he sat on his ass and enjoyed the rewards he was trying to force me in this box. I wasn't gonna have it. The realization made me feel sick. This wasn't even about me. It never had been. He didn't want me. He wanted any woman who would fit the mold of the fantasy they sold him. And when I didn't, he tried to break me down, mold me into it, push me into submission. Little by little, I felt violated, angry, used. He had loved those podcasts, those ideas more than he had ever loved me. And now after spending months shoving me into the dirt to lift himself up, he had the audacity to want my sympathy, because he couldn't afford the rent without my contribution. I could picture him now sitting in that apartment alone, drowning in bills, watching his carefully crafted story fall apart. And he still probably thought I was the gold digger, not him, not the guy who expected free labor, free meals, free comfort, and free sacrifice. No, in his mind, I was the problem. I could feel the anger bubbling in my chest, hotter, sharper than before. Not just at him, but at the entire system that lets men like him believe they are owed something just for existing. I let it go on for 2 months. 2 months of red flags stacking up, of doing the extra work, of trying to be patient, of giving him a chance to course correct. Never again. I was in my 30s. I was done babysitting GR men who expected free labor just because society told them they deserved it. Never again. I was done. Analyzing, done. Explaining, done. Feeling like I needed to justify my decision to anyone. But somehow my brain wouldn't shut up. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I had missed something, some deeper layer to his sudden transformation into the kind of man who thought a proper woman should clean up after him for free. And then the letter came. From Mr. Davis, a plain white envelope wedged in my mailbox. I almost didn't open it right away, assuming it was just a random bill or junk mail. But the moment I saw the sender name, something twisted in my gut. Why the hell would Mr. Davis be contacting me? The lease was in Chad's name. I tore it open, and as my eyes scanned the words, my breath hitched. Outstanding balance. Balance, unpaid rent. I blinked, rereading the numbers, my pulse spiking as the reality settled in. That cheap, manipulative bastard hadn't even been paying his full share of rent. My hands started shaking as I flipped through the breakdown. I had been covering more than I thought. He had been quietly shifting the burden onto me bit by bit while sitting there telling me I was a gold digger. He was a snake in the grass. I felt my stomach churn, part rage, part humiliation. How long had he been doing this? I sat down, my mind racing, and pulled up my banking app. I had never really double-checked our payments before, because why would I? We had a system. We had a spreadsheet. He was the one who made the goddamn spreadsheet. It was also calculated so precise. He was always making excuses about how I didn't understand finance. That was because he didn't want me to know the truth. And yet, as I compared transactions, I saw it. The pattern: he had never adjusted his portion properly after the raise. The difference I had been making up for it month after month, that little 80 increase in his rent contribution, should have been more, a lot more. Meanwhile, he had an extra $400 a month in disposable income money he was keeping for himself. While I unknowingly subsidized his lifestyle, I had been working my butt off so he could spend all day in the gym. I could barely breathe because I knew where that money had gone. I had already seen the charges on his account, the podcast subscriptions, the monthly payments to some masculinity club, expensive protein powders, and even some online courses promising to unlock the ultimate male potential. I had been paying his way while he paid to be brainwashed into thinking I was beneath him. He had been turning me into the problem so he could fix me like a project, my vision blurred, heat crawling up my neck, a buzzing filling my ears. Chad made me feel like I was the problem. He made me question myself, question my standards, question whether I was expecting too much, and the whole time I was literally paying to be manipulated, I was funding my own destruction. I thought back to every conversation we had about money. The spreadsheet, his fair system, that he controlled the little comments, "Oh, I'll send you my share later. Oh, I must have calculated that wrong." The sudden reluctance to discuss finances, how he would get weirdly defensive if I asked about rent as if I was accusing him of something. The smugness, the slow transition from being my equal to acting like he was above me, like his time mattered more, like he was my goddamn superior. Had this been his plan? From the start, had he always intended to slowly push me into dependency while building his own safety net behind my back? Because it was too perfect, too calculated. Chad gets a raise. I start paying more rent without realizing it. He gets a raise. I start doing all the chores. He gets a raise. I start losing my independence, all while he's learning from these podcasts, from these groups, from these pathetic online spaces where insecure men teach each other how to break a woman down. I felt violated, not physically, but in a way that made my skin crawl, in a way that made me want to scrub myself raw, just to get rid of the lingering feeling of being used. I thought about all the fights I let go, all the times I picked up his slack, thinking he's just stressed he'll come around. He was never going to come around because he had designed it this way, and now he was begging for my sympathy through mutual friends because he couldn't afford the rent without me. I actually laughed when I thought about it, laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that tasted like bitterness in my mouth. Oh, the irony. Chad had called me a gold digger. But in the end, who was the one screwed without the others? Money. Who was the one who couldn't sustain himself without tricking someone else into paying his way? It wasn't me, I knew. Some people would wonder why I didn't notice sooner, so I thought about all the things I'd explained to them. Chad built the system himself, the spreadsheet, the rules, the budgeting. He controlled it all. I just trusted him. I wasn't keeping score. At first, we had natural preferences for chores. He liked vacuuming, I liked dishes, but I noticed when the balance shifted, when it became assumed that I'd pick up the slack. We had talked about the future, we had agreed on what our relationship should be. That wasn't just in my head. He knew what I expected, and he still planned to get against me, the podcast. He listened in secret. That's what haunted me the most. We had always shared things. We found interesting, stupid memes, dumb videos, movies, but this, he hid it. He knew it was wrong. I clenched the letter in my hand, my nails digging into the paper. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't the problem. I was just the target, and I had escaped before he could finish the job. When I walked away, I thought that was it. I thought I had burned the bridge, cut the cord, erased Chad from my life. But parasites don't just disappear when you stop feeding them. They cling, they beg, they rot. First, there was silence. I moved into my new place, settled into a life without the suffocating weight of his mess, his manipulation, his entitled expectations. My apartment stayed clean without effort. The air felt lighter. The food in the fridge was always mine, but then the messages started not from Chad. He was still blocked, but through mutual friends. Little whispers, desperate breadcrumbs trying to pull me back in, he says. You overreacted. He doesn't know why you're making a big deal out of this. He thinks you should at least talk to him first. I ignored it. I was done. There was nothing left to say, but the messages kept coming. The tone shifted. He needs help with rent. He can't afford the apartment without you, he says. It's only fair you contribute fair. That word made my skin crawl. He had spent months quietly draining me, making me pay more rent than I realized, letting me pick up the slack and in every possible way. And now without me, he was sinking the weight I had been carrying for him, was finally crushing him. Instead, I almost felt bad. Almost instead, I let it happen. I let him struggle. I had been expecting his desperation, his attempts to pull me back into his orbit, but I wasn't expecting the public performance. One day Mike sent me a screenshot. Chad had posted a long, self-pitying rant online dripping with misery and self-righteous indignation in his version of the story I had been betrayed him. I had abandoned a good man who just wanted a traditional relationship. I had thrown away love for money. He even tagged some of those alpha influencers. It was pathetic and manipulative, my stomach twisted but not with regret, with rage, because there it was laid out for everyone to see, the final desperate lie. Chad had called me a gold digger, but now that I was gone, he was the one who couldn't afford his own life. I braced myself for sympathy in the comments, for people taking his side, consoling him, feeding his ego. But what I saw instead, people calling him out, his own friends tearing into him. Someone even mentioned the unpaid rent. Someone else called him out for expecting a partner to work full-time and clean up after him. The longer I scrolled, the clearer it became. No one was buying his act. He had played himself into a corner, and now he was sitting in the wreckage of his own making. For a moment, I imagined him in that apartment alone, drowning in bills, watching his carefully crafted story fall apart. I had spent so long thinking he was smarter than he was, that he was pulling some intricate calculated manipulation. But really, he was just another man who thought he could break a woman down, then cried when she left. He was an empty, spoiled little boy. I never responded. I never acknowledged the messages, the apologies that came later, the weak attempts at reconciliation. I let him fade into irrelevance one day. I heard through someone else that Chad had moved back in with his parents. That was the final thread, the last piece of closure I didn't even know I needed. I had spent 2 years lifting him up, supporting him, making sure his life was running smoothly, while he quietly chipped away at mine. Now, I was thriving. I had rebuilt, and Chad, he was right. Back where he started maybe now, his mom could wash his dishes, but it would never be me 6 months later. I was at a tech conference giving a presentation on the challenges women face in the industry. I'd poured my heart into it, sharing my own experiences with sexism and the subtle ways I had been undermined as I stepped off the stage, feeling both exhilarated and vulnerable. A figure approached me. It was Chad. He was thinner, his expensive clothes replaced with a simple, unassuming outfit. The alpha swagger was gone, replaced by a hesitant, almost apologetic demeanor. He didn't try to touch me, didn't try. To force a conversation, he simply waited, his eyes filled with an unfamiliar humility. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice barely audible above the hum of the crowd. "I heard you were speaking today. I wanted to hear what you had to say." I stared at him. Was this another act, another attempt to manipulate me? But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something different, something broken. "Why?" I asked, my voice guarded. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because I realized everything I believed was wrong about women, about relationships, about everything." He gestured vaguely to the crowd, to the conference, to the very world he had once inhabited with such arrogance. This is the world I should have been listening to, not those echo chambers." He confessed that he had been in therapy, slowly deconstructing the toxic ideologies he had absorbed. He spoke of the shame he felt for his actions, the regret he carried for the pain he had caused me. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, his voice cracking. "I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to be better, trying to understand the damage I caused." I listened, my heart pounding in my chest. A part of me wanted to dismiss him, to reject his apology, to cling to the anger that had fueled my recovery. But another part of me, a part that yearned for healing, felt a flicker of something, not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "What are you doing now?" I asked, my voice softening slightly. He told me he was working at a local community center, volunteering to mentor young men at risk of falling prey to the same toxic ideologies he had embraced. He was trying to use his own experience to steer them towards a more positive, respectful path. "I'm trying to make amends," he said, "in whatever small way I can." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the alpha Chad I had once known, but a flawed, struggling human being grappling with the consequences of his actions. And in that moment, I realized something profound. My healing didn't depend on his redemption. It depended on my own choices, my own path forward. "Chad," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I appreciate you telling me this. I hope you continue on this path of healing and making amends, but you need to know something. Our story, It's not about you anymore, it's about me. It's about my journey, my strength, my resilience, and I'm not gonna let your past mistakes define my future." He nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I know," he said softly, "and I respect that." He turned to leave, but as he did, I called out to him. "Chad," I said, "maybe someday I can forgive you, but right now I need to focus on my own life, on building a better world for myself and for other women, and you can best show your remorse by doing the same in this new world." He smiled faintly, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I understand," he said. "Thank you, Sarah." And then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd. I watched him go, a sense of profound peace settling over me. Chad's choices were his own, and his redemption, if it ever came, would be his own journey. My journey was different. It was about reclaiming my power, about building a future where women were valued and respected, about creating a world where toxic ideologies had no place. I turned back to my friend, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of curiosity and concern. She squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with admiration. "You were amazing, Sarah," she said. "You took your story, your pain, and turned it into something powerful." I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my own eyes. "It wasn't easy," I said, "but I realized the most important thing is to never let anyone, not even someone who hurt you, define who you are. You define yourself." And as I stood there surrounded by a community of strong, resilient women, I knew that I had found my ending. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. It was empowering, and it was mine. The echo of Chad's alpha might linger in the world, but it would never define me, my strength, my voice, my journey. That was my story now, and I was finally ready to write it.